in terms of how you're positioning things. The brand can certainly, over time, as you build up goodwill in that brand, the association of people thinking not just about, oh, you're another photo sharing site. No, you're Instagram, right? There are big differences here because of the brand. It doesn't happen overnight, but it can become a very strong protection. And then that way too, I think, when you're a smaller company, a startup dealing with larger companies often, sometimes will care about the brand very much. Sometimes they'll be thinking, no, we want to do the opposite with that. You've got great technology. What we want to do is take it and put it under one of our brands that we've had for dozens of years, that the public knows around the world, and that's going to elevate that technology and really catalyze the growth of that technology, because now it'll be under one of our brands. And so branding can be a big discussion in the context of commercialization, not because it's the brand that any one of you would have. I'm not saying your brand is not important, but I'm just saying when oftentimes we get into these transactions and the big companies saying, hey, what matters to us is that we're able to put this under our brand. Then you negotiate how that's going to happen. So that can happen as well. So why should I care? We've talked a bit about this, and I think hopefully that the answers to this are becoming more apparent as we move through. And I would just say, you stay at this with the projects you're working on. You move on to other projects. Those who you're interacting with, who you'll need to get on your side, whether it's, again, customers, investors, others, they will answer this question for you. And the answer will be, why should I care? Oh, because this person cares. And this person's someone who I really need to have be a customer, or that I really need to get investment from, or I need to have them be, I'd have them help me, right? And so this question has some base elements to it, but it changes over time as well. I hope you're also getting the flavor that intellectual property is really everywhere. We can talk about filing for a patent, certainly can be vitally important to a company. We can talk about a copyright. We can talk about a trade secret. And as we go through this and we think about, wow, every line of code I write is subject to copyright. Every line of code that we're maintaining as a secret, not even every line of code, but gee, we've got lists of business plans and business ideas that we haven't disclosed to the public. We've got lists of potential customers. We've got, wow, IP is everywhere. It is, right? When you look at the different building blocks of IP, it really is everywhere. I think the important part is recognizing what does it really mean to you? And by extension, not just to you, but to your customers, to your competitors, to investors, to acquirers, the list goes on. Going into a situation of being able to answer that question is important. And I'll be upfront. The answer to this for some people may be, well, they really don't care about our IP. They care about something else, right? Okay. We're dealing with that individual or that group. Maybe the focus isn't as much on intellectual property. Others, you'll get the sense that they're definitely, above all else, concerned about your intellectual property. Okay, now that's a priority for us, right? So weighing when IP is a priority and how it's a priority is important, right? It'd be nice for me to sit here as an attorney who deals with this, who makes a living on this, and say, it's always important. It's the most important thing that there always is for a technology company. For some, that may be true. For others, again, it's situational, and it also depends on what discussion you're having. So recognize that this can be an important issue, it can be a less important issue, and getting a feel for the context you're in and how important the issue is important. We've talked about ownership, we've talked about protection, we've talked about sharing, and we've talked about, hey, why is this important? Well, the value of intellectual property in terms of the relation it plays to the value of my company is increasing. I tend to look at the bottom one and I say, really intellectual property should be about opportunity. It's the opportunity to build a company. It can be the opportunity to commercialize a product within a company. But thinking about, you can think about, okay, it's ownership, it's protection, defense could be on here as well. what's the opportunity that's being created? And again, back to the tools, what are the tools that are best going to help move the company or the individual or whoever it is, the owner of the intellectual property, move them toward that opportunity. The number one problem is this. It's not necessarily never having heard about intellectual property or not knowing anything about it. Those certainly figure in, but that's easy enough. It's not, it's sticking your head in the sand. It's saying, boy, we've got a ton of other things to worry about, and you do, and if at any job you have at a larger company, you will, right? Sooner or later, those of you who, those of you who've been in that situation know that the number of things you have to deal with far outweigh the time you have to deal with it. It's putting the head in the sand and not worrying about intellectual property at all. Now again, sometimes intellectual property is a lower priority. Other times it is a higher priority, and if you're avoiding it, well, I guess in a selfish way I should say, go ahead and do this, because that's often when you have to call a law firm, right? Down the road, because you've missed something. But I'll tell you, those are not the fun issues to deal with. The fun issues to deal with in my life are when somebody recognizes there's an issue with IP, recognizes there's an importance and it's a priority, and we deal with it at the right time, so that down the road, you don't have to deal with the consequences of having missed it. So again, conscious decisions about intellectual property are important. What can you do about it? I think certainly we talk about, well, let's go ahead and file a patent application. Let's file a trademark application. Let's make a list of our key trade secrets. I think there's something else that this all fits into, and that's often referred to as an IP strategy. An IP strategy that supports your objectives, your business objectives, and that really enables you, again, to make conscious choices about IP. When I say IP strategy, in my head what comes up is, well, IBM has an IP strategy, Samsung has an IP strategy, Apple has an IP strategy. when my company's that big, I'll have an IP strategy. You will, but you don't just snap your fingers and have it overnight, right? It's something that starts in earnest even now, right? Go back to one thing I said earlier. It's not about having all the answers. Oh, we've got a strategy and we've checked all the boxes. We made all the filings. In some respect, an investor may look at that and go, why did you spend all that time doing that? You don't need to have done that right now. A lot of strategy can be about the timing of when things will occur. And that timing is not necessarily now. That timing is out over the horizon of your business plan, right? So you may say, we've identified key areas where we may be looking to file patent applications in the future. And we've taken steps to preserve our right and our ability to file those patent applications. Or we filed one now because it's vitally important. We've got 5 others identified, but and we'll be looking at those to evaluate when to pull the trigger on them, but not now. Same thing with trademarks. We're going in and we're doing our beta release or our initial release first to see how it's accepted. If it goes well, then we're going to file for trademark protection, right? Those can be just as good, if not better, answers in terms of the strategy than, oh, we went ahead and stopped everything and filed all our IP, right, and worried about this. Because again, prioritizing is important. So this IP strategy, this notion of a roadmap for how you will support your business objectives, or how IP will support your business objectives. Again, there's a lot else that goes into supporting the business objectives, making the business plan a reality, right? But I'll tell you, I think there's an element to it, and for purposes of the discussion today, we'll talk about this element. There's a lot that gets you from where you are now out through the end of your business plan, right? When we look at IP, we can identify some key building blocks, some key tools that may underpin some of that. We talked about non-disclosure agreements, and we talked about intellectual property assignments, particularly with employees. That can be with contractors too. Oh, my cousin out in Montana is helping us with some stuff. Well, has she signed an IP assignment? Because she should, right? Has she signed an NDA? She should, right? It can also get more formal. It can talk about invention disclosures. It can talk about then taking those invention disclosures and saying, gee, is this important enough that we should file a patent application? Well, maybe, or maybe it should be pushed down the road. Trademark filings, both here in the United States, and then if the business grows, outside of the United States. You know, we talk about being aware of these. Some of them will be continuous, right? The number of non-disclosure agreements that certain of our clients send us, you know, I know that they're getting into non-disclosure agreements with a lot of different companies. They've got a sales force that's out there with a lot of different companies. You know, they have the fortune of being fortunate to be in a hot area and a growing area. That's something they're thinking about every time they're looking at a new business relationship. You know, other things they're looking at on a more periodic basis because it's not something that has to be looked at continually, right? Some companies will say, even startups, the best story I heard on this from a startup here at Boulder. They had come out of a big company, and they had filed, I think, 3 or 4 patent applications by the time I met them. And I said, how did you come up with this? I mean, you come from a big company. I get maybe you know about intellectual property and invention disclosures. And they said, well, you know, we were having troubles because we're all heads down trying to develop the platform. You know, one of us is out there trying to get some business opportunities, selling in advance, or selling on the anticipation that we're going to finish the platform. And we also had the training from having been in the same big company that we all came out of before we founded the startup to know that we ought to be looking at patents. So I said, well, what did you do? Well, we did what any good startup that would do, and that's we gave ourselves an incentive to go ahead and think about patents. Well, what is that? Well, we scheduled a meeting at whoever's house had the biggest dining room table, because we could all fit around it. They didn't have, you know, they're working virtually. I said, that's good. And we made whoever showed up last buy pizza. And we talked for as long as it took about what we thought were the inventions we should consider for patent protection. Because we thought we should at least get 1. We ended up over the course of several meetings coming up with 4. And this process worked so well that now we continue it. Every quarter we get together, you know, we all chip in for pizza now, but we do the same process, right? So this doesn't have to be the big company way of doing things, I guess, is the point here too. This can be what works for your team, right? If it's buying pizza, if it's, you know, going to you know, have beers, if it's, you know, if it's whatever it is at a coffee shop, you know, if it is more formal, that's fine too. But thinking about this can become part of the culture of the company, not at the expense of other more important things, but at the right level. Another thing I'll note is a lot of times, you know, the best laid plans, the best timelines, all get pushed down, right? And so that can be fine too. Timeline shift in software development, timeline shift in product release, timeline shift in intellectual property too. The important thing is realizing, again, having that be a conscious choice. If the passage of time makes that choice for you, you may miss some things. You may have some options and opportunities be foreclosed and precluded. But if you're making informed choices, it may be possible to push off patent filings or trademark filings or other things. Why? Because, hey, our investment didn't come quick enough. We didn't generate revenue fast enough, so we had to push this back. But we did it in a way that allowed us to still have a cohesive story around intellectual property. And you have your business story, you know, your pitch is largely a story, right? You're drawing people in. Your business plan can often be, you know, have plot elements and have a story. And a thread of that, and it's just one thread of many, is the IP. And so it should be part of it. Letting the passage of time make these choices for you is often dangerous, right? Without that element of conscious choice. Certainly things can shift, and again, filing schedules can be pushed off, and that can be fine. That happens at companies, by the way, that have plenty of money and resources to file, but they decide for other reasons to push it off. It's not just because of constraints on resources or on money. But make that choice in a conscious way, in a way that preserves your rights in IP and your opportunity. I've mentioned ownership a number of times, and so I want to focus in on that, just to make sure that we're clear on that. Ownership is very important. Ownership is what gives you the ability, as a company or as an individual, to make the call as to what you want to do with the IP, with the technology. You know, why is certain software released under open source software licenses and other software is released under very protected proprietary software licenses? Because someone, the owner or owners, made the choice, right? again, it's the owner who calls the shots on how the IP, how the technology that's protected by that IP is going to be shared. Centralizing ownership in a company is important. We talked about employee IP agreements with contractors, certainly IP provisions in the agreements you're entering into when others want to use or test your technology. Really helps you capture the value as a company and preserve that value. Now, in talking about ownership, I also say, well, what if it's not ownership? What if we're getting content from users? What if we're getting source code from customers, right? What if we're getting rights and data from homeowners, right? I'm trying to remember all the different business plans, so sorry if I'm mixing them up. But, okay, that's not ownership. That's a right to use, what we often call a license in many cases. That's important too, right? Ownership's important. You're not going to own all the IP that as a business that you use. Increasingly, it's probably been the case forever, but certainly now, a large percentage of the IP that your business relies on is not going to be your own. It's going to be licensed. So ownership's important in terms of the IP that you're developing, that you're playing a role in. But there may be pieces of IP, again, a variety depending on what business you're in, that come from someone else, even from your own customers. Making sure you have the proper license rights to use that IP in your business makes sense. I'll call out the one example I do remember is gee, we've got, it would be customers' code, right, that you're hosting, and I think if I got it right, and I'm not picking on you guys because this is an issue that doesn't just relate to you. It's an issue that right now is a central issue in a merger and acquisition transaction that I'm working on for a client, right? So this becomes a big issue. If I heard you right, you said, hey, we're going to be using it and performing certain services on that code for the customer, but we want to also be able to analyze that, collect information about it, statistics or analytics or what have you, and then use that on a broader basis, right? Gee, do we have the right to do that? The simple answer, I was going to blurt it out when we were talking, was I said, well, what does your agreement say with that, right? Because your agreement may say to the customer, we're going to use your code, we're going to secure your code, host it on our server, and we're going to use it just to provide our services to you. Or that agreement could also say, we're going to use it to provide our services to you, and here are all the commitments we're going to make. But you are also going to grant us the right to go ahead and draw statistical information or analytic information without revealing your trade secrets, because we'll protect you, right? But you're going to grant us the right to draw this information, and we're going to agree that we can then use that information without having to pay you for it, right? We don't have to pay you every time we use that information someplace else, right? That, in the specific context of your project and your business, is specific to you. But if you take that out to a broader level, how many different web-based or mobile platforms are drawing analytics about their users? I mean, you don't have to go any farther than Facebook and talk about Mark Zuckerberg testifying before Congress last week, right? Because that was exactly what they were doing. That was judged as not having gotten proper rights in their users' information to do the analytics that they were doing, right? So this is an issue that hits at the upper levels of technology. If you consider Facebook and social media one of those upper levels, and I would, because they're certainly a big player, the biggest. It hits right with startups too, right? And so this notion of getting rights in IP that isn't yours is essentially the issue you guys have, but it's an issue that I'm sure more of you have as well. But countless companies have, and so very important. I didn't mean to pick you guys out, single you guys out, but I think it's a solvable issue, which is the good news, right?
I appreciate the answer, actually.
Sure. Okay. Great. No. Happy to do that. But it's key because again, ownership is important for the IP that you're developing, and again, making that choice. Sometimes you may choose, hey, you know what? We don't need to own all of this. We're collaborating with another company or another group, and in order to get ownership of the part we want, we may have to let the other folks have ownership of the other part. And this is all articulated in an agreement that you have with them. So it's very, it's as clear as it can get. But there's a give and take. So again, conscious choices around ownership, recognizing though that a lot of the IP you'll use is not owned by you. So it's really the terms of these license agreements that will be important.
So, when writing a user agreement,